Are we ready?
Okay, great. Good evening, and welcome to the South Burlington, Vermont Development Review Board for July 2nd, 2024. I'm Dawn Philibert, I'm the chair of the board, and I'd like to introduce you to other members of the board. Quinn Mann, Frank Kochman, our newest member who's here for her first meeting, Jody Lesko, Charlie Johnston, and me. And then our staff, Marty Gillis and Marla Keene. There's a couple of ways to participate in tonight's meeting, one of which is to attend in person, as some people have done tonight. And if you're attending here, please make sure you sign up in the sign-up sheet in the back of the room to document your participation. And if you're joining us virtually, which many people do, please make sure you register your participation by providing your contact information in the chat box. And if you're attending by phone, you can register your participation by emailing Marla, and I'll give you her email address with your contact information. Her email address is mkeene@southburlingtonvt.gov. This meeting is being recorded. Okay, turning to the agenda, the first agenda item is emergency procedures. We have doors in the back of the auditorium on each corner. In the event of an emergency, you would simply exit and turn left or right, and you would be outside. Item number 2, are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items? Hearing none, we'll move on to announcements and reminders.
So I have been asked to, this is Marla, I've been asked to announce that the audio in this room is not working. So if you are participating online and you have a public comment during the public comment portion of the meeting, please, if it's brief, you can write your comment in the chat box. If it's something more, and I will read it out loud, again, we'll announce when it's time for public comments. If it's something more involved, we will have to do some sort of fancy jiggering of microphones and computer speakers. So please just indicate that you have a relatively long comment or question in the chat box, and we'll make that happen for you. If you are an applicant who is participating online, we'll again do that sort of fancy jiggering of microphones and computer speakers. So please let me know via chat.
Thank you, Marla. Any other announcements? Okay, let's dive into the projects, proposals.
Agenda item number 4.
Yes, thank you. Agenda item number 4, comments and questions from the public that are not related to the agenda. Thank you, Marla. Hearing none. Our first proposal is site plan application SP 2417 and conditional use application CU 2406 of SBRC Properties LLC to amend a previously approved plan for an outdoor storage yard. The amendment consists of constructing a 1.02 acre paved parking lot and changing the use to commercial parking facility at 1877 Williston Road. Is someone here for the applicant?
It doesn't appear so.
Okay. So we are to continue this? Marty, can you please jump in?
Sure, yeah. So the applicant has requested continuation.
And what would be the date we would continue to?
I believe we were looking at the first Tuesday in September.
August.
Oh, yeah, August.
And what is that date?
It's August 6th.
Thanks. Okay. All right, so do I have a motion to continue?
August. I misspoke, yeah.
Do I have a motion to continue site plan application SP 2417 and conditional use application CU 2406 to August 6th?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, we will see the applicant back here on August 6th. Okay, the next proposal is sketch plan application SD 2409 of John Wilking for construction of a new 5,100 square foot, one-story office building on an existing 1.88 acre lot at 40 Kimball Ave. And I will tell you all, the public, including that John Wilking has served on the board for many years, and many of us have served with him and miss him. But I don't feel like his participation on the board biases me in any way. And if anyone feels like they are biased as a result of that, probably that's just you, Frank. Are you feeling like you can be impartial?
Happy to fill this project.
Okay. We've been waiting for this.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you. Any disclosures or conflicts other than that? Okay. Would you state your name for the record, please?
John Wilking. I own Kula Aina LLC, which is the ownership of 40 Kimball Avenue.
Okay.
I'm Carl Marchessault. I'm with O'Leary Burke Civil Associates.
Carl?
Yes,
Okay.
Carl.
You might need to pull your mic in and
Oh,
make sure it's on. Oh, that's right, that's right.
Okay.
I'm gonna make sure your microphones are on. Okay, you're both good, so people at home.
So I'll just speak louder. Carl Marchessault, O'Leary Burke Civil Associates.
Perfect, thank you. Okay.
Welcome. Thank you.
We've all read the staff report. We're familiar with your project. Would you like to give us a very brief
Sure.
introduction?
Sure. So I've owned 40 Kimball Avenue since 2006. It's been used as a parking lot since about 1987 or 88, something like that, when IBM used a lot of the building next door and had a lot of parking needs. It's been used for overflow parking for 30 Kimball Avenue all that time. I was approached by a dental group, Tyler Atten and Nushi Brown, who are behind me, to potentially build a building here for a dental office. It's a large dental office, 5,100 square feet, and has a large parking requirement. So it's a small building on a fairly large parcel with a significant need for parking. The reason we really wanted to come in and do sketch review was in order to fit the parking, in order to fit the river behind us, and the parking and everything else. We need to scoot towards the street slightly, and so that's why we're here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you know the deal. We go through the staff report, focusing on the comments that are highlighted in red, and ask for your input and give the board an opportunity to ask questions.
Right.
So, whoops, I gotta get back to the beginning here. Bear with me. Okay. So, much of our discussion will involve the proposed front setback reduction. And do you understand that there will be new LDRs soon?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you understand all that.
We're
Okay,
we're aware, what we're facing, we're not clear on, obviously, but we appreciate the staff notes and
okay.
getting us clearer on that.
Okay, good. So the first comment, and I actually need a little bit of an explanation from the staff. This is regarding the interpretation of front setback coverage. The last four lines of the text above it, I didn't quite understand, so maybe I'm just dense, but if you could give us a.
Sure.
No.
Yeah, so front setback coverage is sort of a regulation that works to maybe require commercial businesses to have like a front lawn.
Right.
Kind of. So your front setback can be covered by impervious surface up to no more than 30%. So that's driveways, parking lots, when parking was allowed in front of buildings, and sidewalks. So the idea was to limit that, so that way at least 70% of your that front-facing area was grassy space and therefore aesthetically pleasing. So in the table on the previous page, Carl did his calculations and found that they were proposing over 30% front setback coverage. But I guess the way that you did the math was based on the 30-foot.
Yes.
So you included part of the building and stuff like that. And my interpretation as staff was that if we were going to reduce the front setback from 30 to 15, then the front setback coverage would also be just the amount of impervious coverage on that first 15 feet, not the first 30.
Right.
So I just wanted to
Okay.
run that sort of staff interpretation by the board at this preliminary stage to make sure that I'm on the right track and therefore advising Carl correctly.
Thanks, Marty.
Yeah.
So let me read the staff comment. Staff recommends the board consider staff's interpretation of, quote, front setback coverage, quote, end quote, and discuss whether they concur that calculations should be measured with respect to the actual front building setback, not necessarily the 30-foot setback required in the LDRs.
I concur in that, but one concern what are the parameters of our discretion to reduce the front setback?
Sure. So I think the rest of the staff report kind of goes into that, the board's ability to modify dimensional standards. So we'll have, I think, several opportunities to address that comment, but
All right.
yeah, this one was just kind of a quick, easy one at the beginning. Hopefully.
I think we did this for the 1185 Shelburne Road already, a few months ago, when they had that front setback on Shelburne Road that was reduced because they were too close to the road as well.
Sure.
And we applied the same logic with them.
I'm impressed you remember the address of
That is
previous
impressive.
project. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Well, I think part of the reason, just to be quite frank, is, John mentioned that there's been cases, Potash Brook and other cases where there's, environmental concerns, and so that's the biggest reason. And, 15 feet's a lot, but we're also, recognizing, the sort of front sidewalk as well. Because that's going to be preserved, and we'd be grading back from the sidewalk.
Okay,
And the 32%, it's not like, we're at 50% or something like that, we're fairly close, so
Right.
there could definitely be some items, if you wanted a calculation to be the 30, but like Marty indicated, if it's for the 15, then obviously, because the building occupies so much of it, that calculation, obviously, proportionately, I think will be reduced to probably meet that. But we'll definitely show that calculation on the plans.
Another opportunity, should we be exceeding it, is, we've chosen to come off the main sidewalk and have a sidewalk that goes all the way around the building so that there was better pedestrian access. Frankly, we could get rid of a bunch of that. But we think it's probably what you're after. One of the things we talk about later is we should have good connectivity, good pedestrian access. We're threading a needle here.
right,
And we're
understood.
trying to accommodate that. The other thing too is, if you look at the plan, obviously, it's our sidewalk, so we're trying to get on our property and be on our property with a sidewalk, but, if the board felt like just to widen in the front, which I don't know why you do, but there's a lot of things I guess we could do. We're trying to limit our sort of influence on the existing sidewalk and just say, here's a 5 foot, we're gonna take off, this is gonna be at our entryway, like John mentioned, we can wrap around and then provide access all the way around the building. Because there's a layout that we did, with the ravine, but we've actually done 8 layouts and we're just at sketch, but this is a tough parcel
Yeah.
and we're trying to use it to its maximum potential and meet all your regulations.
Sure,
Well, one of the things you could do, arguably, is reduce the amount of parking. So maybe you could help us
Yeah,
understand
let
why.
me explain why this is, normally I think of office spaces needing about 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and medical about 5. This is 8, so it is high. There are 14 chairs in this dental office.
wow,
So there are 14 patients at any one time. and 14 people working on those patients at any one time, that's 28, and 14 people coming in for the next chair during the turn, 42. We have 40 spaces. We're not trying to build more parking than we need. We're building the parking that we do need.
That answers the question. For me.
It's simple math.
Yeah.
And even with this being built the way it is, we are coming to an agreement on the ability for overflow parking, because we think there's a possibility that there will be overflow parking from one side to the other and back again.
Sure.
And so we're talking about overflow parking.
And
to
you
either
own
side.
the other property, correct?
Well, just so we're clear, these are two partnerships that are dramatically different. The partnership that owns 30 Kimball Avenue has 5 partners in it. I'm the major partner, but it has 5 partners who are not partners in this in 40 Kimball. I own 40 Kimball completely free and clear myself, and I would be taking on the 2 dentists as partners here. So, yes, I have interest in both properties, but I have to be cognizant of both partnerships.
Sure, sure, of course.
I'm impressed by the number of chairs. Is this an existing practice? Right?
It is an existing practice, not in the same location, and it's not as big yet. So,
And the 14 chairs is 2 dentists and 12 technicians, or more dentists?
I can't speak to how they're planning to.
Well, we have the principals here, so maybe just a little better understanding.
If you're gonna talk, we just ask that you talk on the mic so that way people, if anyone's watching from home, can figure out how many dentists you have.
And this is sketch plan, so we don't need to swear anyone in.
Yeah, you have to push the button so it's bright green instead of dull green.
Okay. Oh, there we go. So Tyler Ayton, one of the dentists that John mentioned, this is my partner, Nushi Brown. So yeah, right now we currently have a 6 treatment room facility that's in about 2,700 square feet. We have 4 hygienists and 2 dentists, and we're booked out almost 8 months.
Wow.
So it's like 3,500 patients. We also have 2 other locations in St. Albans and Montpelier that are associated but not directly with this location, and are also in the process of acquiring another practice in the area. So between the locations that we'll have by the time this project goes through, we'll have 10 treatment rooms, probably 3 dentists, and 5 or 6 hygienists at that point. So
So you promise that if we allow this, it'll be easier to get an appointment?
that's the goal. I mean, that really is the goal. Like we've been at capacity for years. We've
Well,
had other-
dental access is a real problem in Vermont.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.
Okay, any other questions about number 1 before we move on?
I'll note that parking's covered, I think, later, and I had a question about the adjacent parking as well, but if it makes more sense to do that later when it comes up
Okay.
again, I'm happy to do
All
that.
right, don't
Okay.
forget to ask.
Yep.
Okay, number 2, I'll read it. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to describe how these tests apply to their proposed request for modification. There are 3 criteria stated above from the LDRs.
Well, it does help public safety, public welfare to do this, in my opinion, because we are saving the Potash Brook, frankly. We're making sure that we don't touch anything basically beyond the current level that it's being touched today. And in fact, we'll be putting in stormwater treatment, so it'll probably be improved. Modification it demonstrates to be better meet the purposes of the section applicable zone. I mean, I think again, the Potash Brook speaks to number 2, and
Can I just do a quick redirect?
Sure.
This is very awkwardly worded, and I totally understand. I had to read it 3 or 4 times. But what it's saying is the requirement you're asking to be modified is not necessary to ensure public health safety. So basically, there isn't a 30-foot setback because it's better for the public health. And then the modifying 30 feet to 15 feet better meets the purposes of the comprehensive plan. And it is and modifying from 30 to 15 is the minimum necessary to give you the relief that you're looking for. Does that make more sense?
Not really. I think,
I think the emphasis is on the environmental is what Marla's saying, and I guess I think that's the interpretation that you're giving, and I think we concur. That essentially we're trying to limit our influence or, the construction related, the facility is basically the parking lot and the building. And so by moving it 15 feet forward, we're trying to lessen the impact to Potash Brook. And I mean, I think I do want to touch a little bit. I don't know, right now might not be the appropriate time, but we definitely want to look at the plan and look at top of bank also.
Look at what?
Top of bank.
The top of bank, the grading top of bank.
Okay.
So, but I think proximity is important. I mean, the further you can be away from, environmental. And then the other thing is, I don't want to get into the weeds too quick, but we did email a plan today, and I brought a hard copy, and I think it's very important to one part of the application that we'll definitely touch upon a little bit later. But I think to answer the three questions, I think like Marla said, I mean, our intention is to just limit impact. That's the whole reason why we wanted to do a sketch and present it to the board. We just want to limit our influence to Potash Brook and all the associated buffers,
Okay.
including what we know now to be a river corridor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about number 2, or do we have enough information, board? I think we're ready to move on to number 3. So basically, in a nutshell, this is the question of what improvements would be necessary to mitigate the effects of the reduced front setback.
I think everything's explained really well. I mean, obviously, the first one is we're further than 5 feet. We're nowhere near the 70% coverage.
Could you speak up, please,
Oh,
or
of
pull the
course.
mic in? Pull the mic in. Yeah.
We're-
Oh, that's right,
we're-
that's right.
We're asking for 15, not 5, so that's super important. The second one, 70%, we're nowhere near that maximum coverage. The existing coverage, it says, does not exceed applicable limit of 70% and is not proposed to be increased beyond 70%. And, that's fully our intention. I mean, I think our building is like 6%. I mean, all the things are on there. I think it's like 30% overall. So we're nowhere near any of those. And so for those reasons, yeah. So I think the building is 6, and then I think the building and parking and the sidewalks is like, I believe it's like 32.
25. But, I mean, probably the most interesting number is our rear setback, minimum normally is 30 feet, ours is 250 feet. We're taking care of the river, and that's the point here.
Okay.
We're prepared to do landscaping, sidewalks and interconnectivity on that front to make it as comfortable as possible. I also suggest you look at the plan. It's from the street edge, from the curb to our lot line is about 16, 18 feet before you get to our lot line. And then it's another 15 feet beyond that, instead of 30. But we are set back from the curb about 30 feet.
Okay. Okay, any questions?
I mean, I don't want to be a thorn, but I feel like visualization really helps. I mean, I did bring just a Google excerpt, but you probably already have looked at it. But I have 7, so if the board kind of wants to look at something like that, I could hand them out.
Folks want photos?
If it's okay.
You want art?
It's up to you guys. I mean, you guys, you can just keep going, and I'll just hand it.
Okay.
Some of us might have already pulled that up on our computers as well.
Well, we're
Can I
gonna get-
just note, so
Thank you.
it's, in this comment, it's looking for us to say what modifications to mitigate this waiver if we provided it. I feel like there's more context that comes later in the staff report with the tree removal and such. So can we put a pin in this and actually cycle back? Because we need to work through the other pieces before I can provide feedback on like what would be good to minimize this if we granted it.
Sure, okay. Remind me if I don't
I will.
remember things. Okay, so number 6 really addresses the strong pedestrian orientation.
Number 6.
I think we're on 4.
I'm sorry.
Really moving along.
I am, it's
Oh, we were
it's
flying
a
there.
holiday week, we want to get through this. Number 4, sorry. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to articulate how the proposed front setback reduction relates to the front setback, building placement, and orientation of nearby properties.
So on this one, I think the standard in the LDRs requires that buildings maintain or establish a consistent orientation to the street. This one obviously is not proposing to do exactly that, so just trying to kind of have a conversation with the applicant about, even though we know you're asking to move the building in, there might be ways in which the consistent orientation or whatever can.
Mark, if I may, Marty,
Sure.
if I could point out, almost all of the buildings on Kimball Avenue were built in the 80s. Parking is in front.
Right.
That's what was approved and expected back then. Today, parking is not expected to be in front. Buildings need to be, in fact, you require the buildings to be in front. So in terms of looking the same as other buildings, it's not going to look the same as other buildings. I expect it to look quite a lot like O'Brien Brothers buildings when they get built across the street. But on the front end of this, every building on that street is odd and different. You've got the bank at the corner, which is a big 3.5-story building, all brick. You've got a 3-story building next to us that's it's 2 in the front and 3 in the back. That's a very odd shape. Then we've got our building, 30 Kimball, which is a pitched roof, totally different looking. And then if you go to the next building up, it's a single-story building. And then the building beyond that is the not TSA, it's a GSA government building, and it's a 2-story building, very large. So I'd love to make the building look like the street, but there isn't a look on the street right now.
Sure, so maybe that's something to include in your final site plan submission. I guess the point of sketch is just to flag potential issues, and the board kind of gives you guidance, and so this
Fair enough.
is sort of a rigid standard, and so that's why we're just letting you know now that at the future application time, something like, hey, there is no consistent orientation on this street
Right.
would be helpful, and that way the board can easily say, oh, this standard's met. So that's why we're having this conversation right now. Not necessarily for you to convince the board at this point, but just something for you to do later.
And I think one way that we'll probably work on this is we're a pitched roof at 30 Kimball. We probably will be a pitched roof at 40 Kimball, and that will give it a little more height.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the photo? Thank you. Right. Is your building going to be behind these trees, or the trees going to remain intact?
The building will be about 15 feet off of our lot line. 2 of those trees, the pin oaks that are consistent at 30 Kimball, you'd find 3 oak trees marching across 30 Kimball. There are 2 more oak trees that march across the front of 40 Kimball. And then behind them, another 10 feet, 15 feet, we start having white pine, and there are 10, 12 white pine. Those would have to come down.
So we wouldn't get these, what we're looking at here as a screening effect?
You'd get a very consistent look to what 30 Kimball is today.
Deciduous trees.
Yeah, there'd
But we wouldn't
be
get-
essentially they're like street trees,
Yeah.
oak trees that are and they're
Just a couple of them.
45, 50-foot tall
Yeah.
oak trees,
But just a couple of them, right?
but just a couple of them. Yeah.
All right. So basically, what now would otherwise be screening would be eliminated.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Frank, we are saving hundreds of trees to the back.
Just
Yeah, no, fair enough.
trying to understand what the picture doesn't show. Right?
Yeah.
He's just looking for ways to
You
give you
betcha.
a hard time.
Oh, I know.
Looking for ways to help you out.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, number 5. This is about abrupt contrasts and the contrast between buildings. I feel like you've already addressed this, but I don't know if you have anything else you want to say, and if the board has any questions.
No, I guess I would just point out that there is a significant difference in the buildings on the street. Some are one-story, some are two-story, some are three-story, some are pitched roofs, some are not.
Right. Any
How-
question?
How far will your building be in feet from the building at 30?
Oh, boy, quite a ways. Probably 100 feet?
So we're not really talking about a neighborhood look here, are we? You know,
No, it's a commercial neighborhood, so,
I mean, I don't know if this helps, but you got the plan, if you want to put it up on the screen, I mean, I gave this box just in perspective, just because to the east of us, there's really nothing on that other lot, but I just kind of wanted to show, the two buildings that had parking in the front, and then the necessity for our project to have parking in the rear, and so, this ortho-based visualization on the left kind of depicts that. And to answer the question, I think we are probably close to 100 feet.
yeah, there's probably
By
50,
virtue of the parking being in
yeah,
front.
probably 50 feet of parking to the east of 30 Kimball and about 50 feet of parking to the west of 40 Kimball, so it's about 100 feet.
Of course, on the other hand, there's nothing, I mean, basically, it's all just concrete or a macadam or something between the buildings, right? There's
No, there's grass,
There's
there's a grassy section between, and there would remain a grassy section
any
between.
shrubbery or trees or anything?
Look, Frank, we got to spend about $37,000 on landscaping. We're going to put some trees in.
Do they show up on your plan?
No,
We
we're
haven't done a landscaping plan.
very,
We're-
very, very preliminary.
Yeah.
But based on a parking lot of this size, I think staff said that we'd end up with about 8 trees marching around the parking lot by itself. There's going to be a lot of landscaping.
So this is sketch plan, so you're really here to just get a read for what the board is thinking
We are,
before you invest in more fine detail.
before we drop $100,000 on architects and this guy.
Right.
But one of the factors I think you have in mind, and forgive me, I'm calling a little bit on previous conversations from long ago, you sort of want some permeability between the parking lots, right? So you don't really want barriers between the parking lots, right?
Well,
Do you mean connectivity?
there is connectivity. There's not.
Connectivity is a better word than permeability, right?
Yeah, there's not permeability. There's a grass strip that runs between the two properties now, today, and there would still be a grass strip between the properties. And there's a level difference, height difference. 40 Kimball is higher than 30 Kimball. So the building will sit up a little bit as it compares to 30 Kimball, which actually will help with the one-story, two-story idea.
But there'll be access between the
But
parking lots.
all of the parking, all of the drive comes in, for all those buildings, comes in at 30 Kimball, goes to 20 and down to the bank building, and will go to 40 as well across the face of 30.
Okay,
None of there's only one curb cut for these 4 buildings.
okay.
Thank you. Any other questions about number 5? Okay, now we can move on to 6. So how can you have an active street presence for pedestrians?
Well, I think we've done that. I think, our intent was to make sure that we had an active street presence. I knew it would be a question, so we, right from the beginning, put a sidewalk in from the street side. Main entrance, we expect, will be to the western end of the building. And so having a street presence will allow that. We're going to have all the expected amenities that come with this, including bike parking and so forth, so we'll be on that.
Okay, good. Any questions, board? Okay. Moving way over to number 7. This is regarding landscaping. Staff recommends the board and applicant briefly discuss compliance with the standard. How to comply with the, this parking area, it's a parking area standard, 1304B2.
And we're not ready to approach that yet, just simply because we haven't gone there yet.
Okay.
We understand the standard. We understand that we need to have shade trees around our parking lots. We don't want a big heat zone there. We're building enough parking, and we don't want more than we need, but it's a plenty of parking for this site. So we expect to put in trees.
And we will make your life miserable
If we don't.
if you don't.
Just to clarify, the LDRs actually have two landscaping standards for parking lots. There's the perimeter trees, and then there's also the interior islands.
Right.
It didn't look like you maybe had designed for islands, so that could eat up 1-2
Yeah.
parking spaces.
We recognize that these little 5-foot islands are going to eat some space.
So because we're talking about this and, John's expressed, our need for parking, I don't know if it's appropriate to take a look at the parking lot, but we left like this island right here, thinking that's gonna be obviously a treat island, and then we're gonna have some on this side, but like, we don't think it's appropriate with the handicap accessible and the 10 in the front. But Marty, are you saying in the 14, we'd have to have some sort of island on, in the 14?
No, just that the total space of that parking area,
Yep.
10% of it needs to be landscaped islands. So it looks like you're already providing 1, 2, and then I guess the top 2 corners of the parking lot there could be considered to be landscape islands. We typically do that. So you might be close to 10, but it just didn't, that wasn't the number that you had calculated. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that.
Fully understand what that 10% is and provide the calculations to the
It
board.
would just be like if you did a perimeter of the parking area,
Yep,
just 10% of that interior.
10% of the interior, got it.
Yep.
Okay.
And Marty, you allow if he was to, oh, you're doing diagonal, you're not doing squared off?
What's that?
So we typically kind of split the difference when it's an edge.
Yep.
So it's sort of, the ones in the middle really count, but the ones on the edge, kind of you split the difference. So like, yay-ish.
Okay, we ready to move on? Number 8 deals with the landscaping of the front yard. Staff recommends the board offer the applicant the opportunity to discuss their concept for compliance with this standard in light of the request for modification of setback discussed above.
Well, I think we've sort of discussed that already. Do you need more detail from us?
I feel like I'm happy with that.
I'd like to hear more about, I know you said before, you own the adjacent building with partners. Just if you could speak to more of the capacity of that lot currently, and if there is a possibility for those conversations. I mean, you guys said yourself there's one curb cut to these 4 buildings, so it seems plausible that, this building could share parking with,
Well,
I just
I
would like to hear
understand
more.
I understand staff said there's 100 parking spaces and acted as if, no offense, but implied that was plenty of parking. It's 3.5 parking spaces per 1,000. 4 is the standard for office, and we use 4 per 1,000 for office. So we don't actually have enough parking at 30 Kimball Avenue when we're full. Today, because of COVID, we're 30% empty. The lot looks great at the moment, but the occupancy doesn't. So we're concerned that we make sure that we have enough parking for both uses. And we don't have a problem with the concept of sharing parking when one is pushing over on the other. But we need both parking lots, and I mean, as we said, this is 40 parking spaces for 5,000 feet. We have 32,000 feet next door and 100 parking spaces. Do the math. It's not excess parking.
Understood. Appreciate the explanation.
Okay, number 9 is just kind of a reminder that when you come back at the next stage of review, you'll want to address the comments of the city stormwater section.
Understood, and we plan to meet with them in between and make sure that they're happy. We've gotten some notes that we feel very good about, frankly. But stormwater, South Burlington stormwater is a level above the state, and we're ready to make sure that they're happy.
We did reach out to them. I'm sure you probably know that. But we got comments back, and that's why we decided to submit for a sketch, just because we think we can, satisfy all their concerns.
So I don't see any other comments, so I want to pause and see if there's any public comment.
I think we're going to circle back to number 3.
Oh, that's
is the
right.
plan.
Okay, thank
I
you.
guess just to do a quick, big picture thing. So do the letter of the law, right? The board is only allowed to modify a dimensional requirement if we go back to comment number 2. If the board finds that comment number 2 is adequately addressed. So what I heard from you guys today was that you feel like your argument that just moving the building forward preserves the health of Potash Brook. That's your argument. So then I guess the onus shifts to the board. At this early stage, the board should indicate whether or not they feel like the health of Potash Brook, as it relates to 1, 2, and 3 here, is sufficient grounds to modify a dimensional requirement, and then give you that feedback now.
That'd be great.
That's kind of the whole point of this meeting. So just want to make sure that we do that, and then also Quinn wanted to circle back to number 3, which is same page, so,
Thank you, Marty.
yeah.
I think, yes, I would, okay.
So what are your thoughts, board? Do we feel that this application is protective of Potash Brook? Protective
what-
enough?
What are the purposes of the section and the applicable zoning district?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do we have a list of the purposes of the section and the applicable zoning district? That's what we should be looking at, right?
The site plan review standards?
Right, so the purposes of this section, the section being the site plan review standards, which are things that you read all the time, that the site is generally developed in consistency with the objectives of the city, yada, yada. We can provide that more at the next stage of review. The purposes of the district, what is this, I see?
It's C1LR, Commercial 1 Limited Retail.
So we could read the purpose of the C1LR, if that's helpful.
And just to clarify, the applicant would have to show compliance with all 3 of these criteria that are listed, right? Okay,
Well, the third one is kind of absurd.
yeah. And that's,
Right, so I guess my question is kind of, do you need to see anything further from them at the site plan stage to further bulk up their
Yes.
response to 1, 2, and 3? Or
I'd like to see
No.
what the purposes, if we have a list of the purposes of the district, that would be helpful now.
Yeah,
Sure, so I guess that's something for you guys to hear, is that,
well, I can have that right now.
sure. And then, as you said, Frank, number 3 is a little bit of a silly one. The minimum necessary to afford relief, it's kind of hard to quantify that, but you do have to make a determination based on that standard, so what do you need from the applicant to make that determination?
Well, if it's otherwise a good project. I don't know, what do you think?
I mean,
John?
they demonstrated that they needed the parking area, right? Obviously,
Right.
if they had less parking spaces, they could move the building back. But if we do that, that's going to require them to not be able to fulfill the mission of the, I guess, the proposed.
Well, that's why I want to know what the purposes of the district are. What we've had is an empty lot for many years. It's about to be developed into something that appears useful on its face. What are the purposes of the district? And they are to encourage a location of general retail, specific locations in the city to serve nearby residential areas. Shopping?
So that's how C1LR differs from C1.
So that's the specific district we're in?
Then if I flip to C1, higher intensity residential retail office and vertically mixed uses that serves to enhance a compact central business area.
I think by virtue of just saying that we're a commercial business bringing something in, that's gonna be a lot nicer than a gravel and empty parking lot with all the landscape requirements and the building requirements to be in the front. Speaks pretty highly to the fact that it'd be nicer to see than, no development and just an empty parking lot. I mean, you go back to the C1R, I mean, it says a commercial district to encourage development, essentially. I mean, that's what all of them say, whether it's C1 or C1LR, so.
This isn't adjacent to C1, right? It's adjacent to the mixed industrial and commercial zoning.
It's
Go-
immediately adjacent, yes.
Go
All of
back
those
to-
things are in the vicinity.
Go back to LR, go back to the sub-district again, the specific district.
Nope. There it is.
Well, you're gonna have nearby residential for sure, and you're gonna have a commercial, operation here that we talked pretty specifically, even the owners.
Yeah, specifically, I know
People
it
that wanna use
says
it.
businesses offering goods and services.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we automatically, we meet that description right to the T.
But it'll
Everything
be
you read there
limited, that's what it
is-
says, yeah.
And you're not doing any wholesale dentistry, are you?
For you, Frank, we'll make an exception.
Toothbrushes.
A discount for the DRB when you, for that
No,
crown.
we're not going there. We can't, just for you, Frank.
So Quinn, does that address your question?
I will have to think about that, but I did just in meeting the number 3 here, the modification is the minimum necessary. You guys noted that you have played around with 8 different layouts. Just for a point of testimony, is the 15 feet the minimum?
So
Or,
the problem becomes the swing of cars coming in and coming out, being able to comfortably park in a parking space. We probably could steal 3 or 4 feet and have fender benders. We don't think that's a good idea. We think smart development allows people to park comfortably. So while a travel lane could be smaller, we don't think it's a good idea. If you said to us it has to be 20 feet, we'd find a way to make it 20 feet, but it would be a lot less comfortable to park
Against
in
your
the
better
parking lot.
judgment.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Winooski pushes really hard for 20-foot aisles, and then I hear from other people how bad our design is for making 20-foot aisles.
Yeah. Please speak up so we can hear you.
In Winooski, like I've done a couple of projects with 20-foot aisles, and then I hear fender benders and people saying, they can't park and
Yeah.
get out of their spot. And the true designation from parking from 30 years' experience is pretty standard 24 aisle. I mean, that's most applications, and so, I mean, I've done it, but it's really brought upon by regulation. Like, if that's what the regulations say, but all the regulations in most other towns are 24 standard 18-foot stalls, and 18, 24, 18 is 60. And I strongly encourage people to maintain 60 so that you don't have any problems. I don't like dings in my car. I'll park away from other people specifically not to get dings, and I think there's a lot of people that do that. So people are going to come to this facility, they don't want to come and get a door ding. So for those reasons, I strongly feel we should honor the 24-foot aisle.
understood, so, and your
So the short
minimum
answer
necessary
is, yes,
We have played
we've
with
made this as skinny as possible. I actually started off at 10 feet, saying, you got to go for 10 feet.
But then I thought,
But
they were
he
talking about
found-
the 5.
he found
and
the
then we were
extra.
like, let's go with 15, because,
Well, and you found a way to do it. So we've skinnied it up as much as we think we can and have a good project.
Any other questions?
I guess just to bring it home, number 3 was the one we didn't get to. Assuming it sounds like the board is giving the applicant some indication that they could proceed with a 15-foot front setback, the regulations require that the applicant therefore mitigate any adverse effects of that front setback. So I guess you would, at this time, identify what adverse effects, if any, you see this causing, and then how you would like to see them mitigate those.
I think the obvious adverse effect is that you're going to have to cut down trees, right?
Yes.
You have indicated that you're going to provide a landscaping plan that will provide more trees.
Yes.
Okay.
Other thoughts? Okay.
Yeah, I would also just point out that this internal distribution of driveway is not seen virtually anywhere else. I mean, it is just off Shelburne Road in a couple places, but it really works well. It's been working well for 30 years. And not having a curb cut on 40 Kimball is also a reason to celebrate. So, we could have come and requested it, I suppose, but, and the properties would have been separated more clearly, but this works.
Good.
And when O'Brien does what I think they're going to do, we'll end up with a stoplight at the front of 30 Kimball, allowing people to come and go more easily.
Right. They're going to move Old Farm Road.
Old Farm lines up with the entrance to 30 Kimball. I don't know if it's called Old Farm when you're done, but.
So any other questions before we turn to public comment? Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment? Are there any online, Marty?
There's a few folks online. What I did is for those who arrived late, I explained about the audio issue. I don't see any hands and no one has provided any comments, so I think you are all set.
Okay, and there's no one here who wants to comment? Okay. So it's sketch, so we don't have to vote to conclude. So we'll just say thank you and good luck. We'll see you back here at some point.
Thank you for your time.
you.
Appreciate it.
Always good to see you, John.
Nice to see you, Dawn. And Frank, great to see you, too.
I'm looking for ways, John, but so far you're sliding by,
I'll bring a red herring for you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 7, final plat application SD 2410 of Eric Sample to subdivide an existing 1.37 acre lot developed with a single-family home and detached accessory dwelling unit into 2 lots of 1 acres and 0.37 acres for the purpose of establishing the existing single-family home and accessory dwelling unit on 1 and constructing a family or duplex home on lot 2.25 and 55 Highland Terrace. Who is here for the applicant, please?
I am Eric Sample.
Hi, Eric. Before we swear Eric in, does anyone have any conflict of interest or disclosures? No, hearing none. All right, I'm going to swear you in. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, thank you. So,
I'm getting married, so that could be practice.
okay. So I guess my question to
Thank you.
staff are, why are we reviewing this as opposed to deliberating about this?
I think you have to. I think there has to be
The prior was a site plan.
the first one was a sketch, right?
So Eric has properly submitted first a sketch plan and then a final plat application. The board has to hold a public hearing for final plat, but when staff feels that there aren't any issues, any red comments, sometimes we will go directly to a decision
Okay.
instead of writing a staff report, just to cut out the middleman.
Right, I got it, okay. But we still want to take public comment.
Still take public comment, still give Eric an opportunity. He's read the draft decision, and if there's anything he's concerned about, he can ask those questions now. This is just a draft.
Yeah.
You can modify it.
Sure.
But this is staff's suggested draft.
Okay, thank you. So you've read it, I'm assuming, Eric?
Yes.
Do you have any comments, additions, edits you'd like to offer?
No, they've already been answered, so
Okay.
I think I've got a handle on it.
And board, do you have any questions about the decision and findings of facts as written? Okay, but I wondered if you had any at this point for the applicant? No, okay. So let me open it up for public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment? Do we have any online, Marty?
I don't see any hands raised, and no one has typed in the chat.
So I would entertain a motion to close this hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of closing ST 2410, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. We will deliberate and be in touch.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of moving forward with the legality and the purchase of the development right, where am I now in this process?
Well, I assume you have a contract.
I have a contract, and I would like to execute it.
You probably want to wait.
There's a 10-day waiting
I
period.
just turned my mic on because I got a wave from the tech guy back there. I think you probably want to wait until you actually have the decision in hand.
Okay, and what's the timeline for that?
So typically, the board deliberates at their next meeting, so that would be July 16th.
Okay,
Is when the deliberations will take place, and then assuming the board comes to an agreement and votes, and it's in favor, then the application would be sent to Don for signature, and once Don signs it, then we send it out. So I would anticipate, if things go as perhaps they seem like they will go, that you would receive it by Friday, July 19th, or sometime around there.
okay, so I should hold off on any purchase plans. I just have a deadline for the TDR. I have a deadline for the option, which is further out, but I wanted to start moving forward with the lawyer and getting the easement rights going. Does it make sense for me to do that at this point?
Well,
You're probably best off waiting till there's a decision, because the board can, you can certainly, have a high-level conversation, but the board can and does modify these decisions. So while it will likely look a lot like what you have seen, there may be some subtle changes that they make. So I wouldn't finalize anything till the decision's issued. Once the decision's issued, feel free to begin work during that 30-day appeal period, because if there is an appeal, it's a whole big process, and,
I thought the appeal period was a 10-day period,
no, 30.
the 30-day appeal period.
and also, just so you're clear, I mean, Marty gave you the likely timeline.
Right,
The legal timeline is 45 days. We have 45 days to make a decision legally. But
Could I request that it happen before then, because my option will expire?
our expectation is that it probably will. I just didn't want to mislead you about that.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, I just wanted to, it's $15,000, and I want to, before I spend it, I want to make sure I have the appropriate approval, so, yeah. Okay, cool, so then perhaps one possibility is by Friday the 19th, I can move forward, and then in terms of the legality of the deed and everything else, I can be in touch with you guys about how that works and what to.
Absolutely.
Okay, great, well, I appreciate it,
Thank you.
thank you, yeah.
Okay, moving on. The next project is site preliminary and final plat application SD 2412 of O'Brien Eastview LLC to amend a previously approved plan for a planned unit development of 155 homes in single-family duplex and three-family dwellings on 11 lots totaling 23.9 acres, 24 commercial development lots totaling 39.8 acres, and 25.2 acres of undeveloped or recreational open spaces. The amendment consists of subdividing a .17 acre lot for the purpose of a battery storage microgrid in an area previously approved for open space, adding 14 units in two-family homes, replacing 2 large single-family homes with 4 detached cottage-style units, modifying the approved phasing and other minor amendments at 500 Old Farm Road. Who is here for the applicant, please?
My name's Scott Homestead. I'm the civil engineer for the applicant. I'm a mess here. Just looking for a pen. I'm Andrew Gill with O'Brien Brothers.
Okay, thanks.
Just so you guys know, because you came in a little bit late, the audio in the room is not working, but please continue to use your microphones because it's being recorded and that is working just fine.
Okay.
But you are
Talk
going to have
loud.
to speak up for the benefit of the board.
Now, before we swear the applicant in, does anyone have a disclosure or a recusal? I will simply say that I own a piece of property in Hillside, owned by O'Brien, which was originally owned by O'Brien Brothers, but I don't believe that that will affect my judgment or persuade me in any way. If anyone has any, feels differently, please let me know. Okay. All right, who is, oh, we've already identified you. Okay, let's swear you guys in. Right hand up, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Great, okay, thanks. So you know the drill. We're going to go through the staff report, item by item, focusing on the highlighted areas. Do you have a 2-minute overview or anything you want to say before we dive in?
Sure.
Okay.
So the, basically, I think the main, there are a couple main drivers to the application. We sort of bundled a few additional things into it, but the main focus, I think, for us and for the application is, we had discussed previously the sort of, the homes that originally were part of this PUD that were, approved at preliminary plat, that we carried through our permit set all the way until final plat. And sort of right at the finish line, we discovered there was an issue with height waivers and the inability of the board to grant those waivers. And so I think that's sort of the driving thing and the most important piece of the application from our perspective. There's some other items in there, but I just wanted to make sure that, I know it looks like I'm losing my memory as I get older, I think, maybe, or as my kids continue to yell at me, but there are a couple of new faces on the board, and so I just want to make sure that that history is sort of understood there. At the time that we had sort of carried these units basically to an approval, and then we discussed that this waiver couldn't actually be granted as it was assumed it could. The conversation then shifted to, it appears under the new regulations that these units could be approved, so why don't you just table them, take them off your site plan for the time being, come back in for an amendment, and we'll add them back in. And so I think that context and history to the application is important, and I'm happy to answer questions or provide more detail on that if there's anything we can add, but I do think that piece is important to note. And it didn't appear in the application anywhere, so.
And I have to apologize. I was not here when you did sketch. I was away, so I'm not as familiar with your project as other people might be. Okay, let's go ahead and look at number 1. Let's see, ask for the administrative officer to be permitted to allow work to be considered temporarily complete, and therefore allow the application to move on to the dependent phase. I was not sure what that meant. Staff recommends the board confirm with the applicant that this interpretation is correct. Is what's written there what you meant? You look.
Yeah, I think that's
surprised.
right, yeah.
It's correct.
Yeah, so basically what we're asking for is if there's a deadline for zoning permits. So the phasing plan says, for instance, that we need to relocate Old Farm Road, construct it and open it curb to curb by the time we pull the 125th zoning permit for the project, or that the permit would not issue. And so what we're saying is we'd like that 125 number to potentially be able to be 126 or 8 or 30, provided certain conditions are met that would be out of our control, things that might delay us from completing that, like, I don't know, a flood or, something along those lines.
That's what we discussed at the site plan, was that they had flooding last year and delayed some of the construction of the roads.
At the sketch plan, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. So are we good? Frank, you look puzzled.
I am puzzled, but maybe I'll catch up with you. I don't want to stop it all.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff about this particular issue here, so we can, but in terms of like what we mean by an extension, that would be what we mean, is the administrative officer being able to say, it's okay for you to go beyond your 125th zoning permit because these conditions have been met, and we understand that you're doing everything you can to meet this obligation, but for some reason that's out of your control, you're not able to.
Okay. We good with that?
Yes,
Okay.
I hope. I think the other comments will get to it.
Okay. So number 2, staff recommends the board permit right-of-way infrastructure to be considered complete if, were it any other type of work, were eligible for a temporary certificate of occupancy subject to the standard test pursuant to 17.03D.
Thank you. That's compliment coming from an attorney. So there's a lot of exposition before this, and if you read the whole thing word for word, then it might make a little bit of sense, but I understand it's a lot of words. So under most projects that are site plans, everything is contained within the applicant's property, and the administrative officer has the authority to issue a temporary certificate of occupancy due to circumstances outside the applicant's control. And there's some examples given. Inclement weather that may have prevented final paving or installation of required landscaping. In the applicant's case, there are some phases, for instance, the Old Farm Road sidewalk between the project area and 116 that you had many meetings about. That work is not within the applicant's project. So normally that work is not subject to a certificate of occupancy, so the administrative officer doesn't have the authority to issue a temporary certificate of occupancy and say it's effectively complete. So what staff is saying here is in the case of those projects that are not subject to a normal certificate of occupancy, can we treat them the same way? Can we treat infrastructure projects the same way and consider them complete in the same way as we would a private site?
What are your thoughts, board?
What are the risks of doing that? What could go wrong if we do that? And I think is probably a helpful kind of thing for me to think through.
Great question that I did not prepare for.
Those new board members.
I guess
Cody, I'm new.
Hi. Hey, Jody.
the point of a lot of these conditions was to ensure that the public infrastructure of this project is keeping pace with the amount of homes. So like when you're referencing 125, I forget what that is. That's Old Farm being complete.
Right.
And so, yeah, like if we run out of rocks or something and they can't make the road or whatever, like O'Brien would say, well, we did everything we could and there's no rocks. And so functionally what that means is that there might not be an Old Farm Road and they want to keep building even though Old Farm Road is not complete. And so the intent of that condition originally was, hey, we think by the time the neighborhood is this filled, people will want to be using both sides of Old Farm Road. So I guess the flexibility there, it is a little risky in that, maybe the rocks will never come back and we never finish it, but we give them the temp CO and they continue building or something like that. But I think.
Or people who currently live there.
Right,
if there's additional traffic, that's
Right.
the kind of thing.
That's a pretty
I also
outlandish
live-
scenario, though. I think the most recent thing that actually happened was they were supposed to complete a park by a certain zoning permit,
Yep.
and then we just had like torrential rain last summer, and the grass couldn't seed. And so by the time we went out for the CO for that park, it wasn't really ready to be a park. But O'Brien was like, hey, like we want to keep building, and
We could treat that, the sidewalk thing gives me pause, but we could treat that as just within the compass of a seasonal allowance, like, you can't do it in the winter, so you got to do it in the spring. Well, you can't do it after a torrential rain, but you can do it the next time the ground is suitable. That seems to be.
so I guess maybe more things like supply chain issues or.
Hang on a minute, but let's take them one at a time. That is one of the items. Is that right? Sure. So that's apples to apples with a seasonal allowance. That's nothing unusual about that, right? So could we tick through the specifics of what's being asked for and then make the determination like that?
Sure. On the bottom of page 4, Marty, there are some things that are dependent on other things. You're slightly too far. No, it's in italics above.
Maybe I could just add a little bit of color to the sort of reason for the request. So the projects and phasing that are listed are enormous projects of great cost. And they're not things that can be done in a day. For the most part, they're things that take a year, maybe more, to complete. And the zoning permit sort of finish line is super impactful because the zoning permits are associated with people who have bought homes who have a contract for a home. And so if we run up against a situation where like we can't start a contracted home for a customer, I mean, that's just bad for everybody. It's bad for the customer, it's bad for their family, it's bad for us. And the sort of easy thing to say is, well, let's just get started on everything sooner. But the reality is we started Leo Lane, the first phase last year, and we had to put up a bond very large bond. The whole value of the 115% of the cost of the entire road. We have a limited amount of bonding capacity, and I can't bond for, $10 million worth of work at the same time. And so in order to start a phase, I have to complete a phase. And so there's this logical stagger that happens where we have to do a bunch of work before we can get a permit to start the next phase of required work. And so we run into these situations where any number of things can delay our ability to start a phase we want to start because we can't button up something, or potentially we've requested a bond release from the city and maybe that takes 90 days to get processed. And until they process it, that bonding capacity is tied up and we can't therefore start the phase we want to start to build the thing we need to build. And so there's all sorts of complexity to how we move these things along. We try really, really hard to stay ahead of all that. And that's sort of our ultimate goal. We never really want to be in the position of needing these things. But there are complicating variables. So, for instance, the city of South Burlington will not allow you to install water main between November 11th or November 15th and April 15th of any year. And so if one of these roadways that we need to build requires water main to be installed, we're just prohibited from doing it for like an 8-month period. And so that could delay our ability to open relocated Old Farm Road by 8 months, depending on when we can start that phase, when the bonding lines up, when the things are released. And so we're just trying to get sort of an opening here where the administrative officer has some authority to say, I understand you couldn't put water main in for the past 7 months. Therefore, we can be a little flexible with these timelines within reason.
Well, Andrew, you've just given another example that I think reasonably falls within a, quote, seasonal limitation. Right? It's not nature that has dumped the snow and made it impossible. It's the city that has made it impossible. All right, for the seasonal purpose, so that can be stretched. All I'm saying to you is, let's go through the items you want,
that'd be
one by one, and see what the rationale. See if they fit within a pre-existing rationale. And then isolate the ones that don't fit within a pre-existing rationale and see if there's a basis for allowing it, or perhaps it shouldn't be allowed. You have to accept that possibility.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. Let's go through what they are.
I think the main seasonal items are listed here, and I can double check in what we submitted, but it looks like what I wrote.
I think that what you're headed towards and what Marty has on the screen is not what Frank's asking. I think what Frank is asking is, what are the phase triggers that you'd like the flexibility on? Is that correct, Frank?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, the phase triggers are at the bottom of the previous page, starting there and going on to the next page. So phase 2, we've already passed that point, but it says lot 18 open space has to be complete by zoning permit issuance for the 30th unit. And then it says lot 19 open space has to be complete by zoning permit issuance for the 75th unit. So that hasn't been completed. So
then the question is, why hasn't it been completed?
they haven't gotten there yet. They're not at 75. But Andrew's saying there may be a scenario in which, I don't know, something happens that you don't think is covered by the temp CO provision?
Well, the temp CO provision that you just read has two allowances for asphalt and for landscaping. And so I already listed another one that's not covered, which is water main. And then my other big issue is, the temp CO process is sort of designed by nature for a building on a lot that's owned by somebody. So, if somebody has $50,000 worth of concrete sidewalk to put in and they want to do it in the middle of winter and the city wants to say, you have to do that even though it's the middle of winter, okay. If somebody has $500,000 worth of city sidewalk to run down a road and the director of public works would prefer you not put it in winter because ultimately he's going to have to take it over and take care of it when it's spalling and cracking and heaving because you couldn't effectively heat it. It's something that should be considered maybe a little bit differently. So I think those were sort of the concrete, the water main, landscaping, topsoil. Those are sort of the main things that I'm thinking.
Is there anything out, as far as the rationale goes, all the things that you're describing to Frank's point are falling into the seasonality or like inclement weather? Do you foresee, and I know you can't, I know this is part of the issue, but are those, because I think what we're trying to get at this point is there going to be a situation in supply chain? And maybe those are the three things we've hit on. Is there anything outside of those three categories, let's call them right now? Because what we don't want is staff to be in a position of something coming up that doesn't fit into any of those buckets, and then it doesn't feel like it's within the realm, and then you being surprised that, do you see what I'm trying to get at? Or do those kind of cover what you are concerned about?
The seasonality, the supply chain, the other one that I touched on in the application, which I think is relevant, is sort of delays in process that are outside of my control. So,
Well, what does that mean?
For
Give an
instance,
example.
if I can't start constructing Old Farm Road until I get this is a specific example. I can't start constructing relocated Old Farm Road until I have an agreement in place with the city and they take steps in a process to relinquish their existing Old Farm Road and solidify that they will adopt the new one. And so this development agreement is something that needs to be in place for me to be able to do that work.
There's
And-
no requirement for a development agreement.
Well, so relocated Old Farm Road is a multi-million-dollar road. And existing Old Farm Road runs right through the middle of our project lots that would be developable without existing Old Farm Road on it. And so we can't get financing for anything related to any of this while we have an existing city right-of-way running through the middle of our land. And there needs to be a certification by the city that in exchange for constructing the new road, they will relinquish the old. And that agreement was drafted and handed to the city in August of 2023, and we've received no feedback on it at all, despite multiple requests.
Who are you dealing with?
The city attorneys and team.
Well, let's be fair. There was a request for prioritization of the 17 things you gave to the city attorney, and that was not at the top of the list. But, when you're ready for it, it'd be a great time to bring it up. If you're looking for a development agreement, though, that's not an expectation of the board's decision, and that's fine. Like, you can ask for that.
So it's just an example of a process thing that can create a delay. And it's a very real example, and there's a lot of comments in the staff report about sort of starting things in advance and being able to get these things done early. And there were also comments that I made that said, hey, if I'm seeing a problem, I'm going to come to the board and make it plain that I'm seeing a problem with me being able to complete this. I'm seeing a problem with me being able to relocate Old Farm Road because we don't have a development agreement in place, and I can't even begin to take the steps necessary to get that work done until I do. So it's a problem, and it's not, a fire right now. We probably have about another year to get that agreement done before it's going to really prohibit me from doing the work in time. But it's an example of something that's out of my control, that's not weather-related,
Well-
that could create a problem.
Okay, but we got a seasonality bucket. I think we can help you with that. You got this problem that you're citing that doesn't mature for a year. Come back in a year. You know, then you mention something else, which is an entirely different category. You're calling supply chain problem. Well, frankly, I call that developer risk, that we shouldn't, you know, that it's not our business to help you solve.
We do typically grant a temp CO for, if there's a demonstrated supply chain problem, which we consider a demonstration to be an invoice. We've ordered it, and here's an email from the manufacturer who said it's not going to be on a truck for 3 more months.
Sounds like
That
there's
would be with
precedent
something
for
like
that.
a slide, like, you know,
Yeah.
like a piece of play equipment.
But that's something we already do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's not outside of, go ahead.
So,
I'm happy with the 2 buckets, the seasonality items. I think I just would say I really would want to give more credence to the full list and not just what the CO process does, because I think this is a little different than a CO. It's not, and, you know, these are some, you know, important concerns. And the other item, the supply chain issue, great. I'm happy to come back in a year or whenever I perceive that the development agreement issue is ripe and hasn't, and is actually going to cause a delay. I think that's fine.
I think you'd have more, well, you know, I can't speak for everybody else, but I think, speaking only for myself, you'd have a friendlier ear if you limited yourself to talking about the seasonal for the time. In other words, stretching the seasonal concept a little bit. I don't think that's unreasonable for a project of this scale. I don't know about anybody else, but.
So Andrew, did you run into these kind of issues when Hillside was built? Or is this a more complex project?
No, I mean, this project is certainly regulated much more than Hillside was.
Okay,
And so this was not a condition that we had at Hillside. We didn't have any of these triggers. We simply were, you know, told to build the project, and we built it.
yeah, okay.
So, and there's all, you know, a lot of instances of that across the state permits and this permit.
Okay.
But yeah, it's very tightly regulated, which is why there's so many different competing priorities and things we need to do that are just kind of creating
Right,
these challenges, so.
okay. I'm concerned about the amount of time we're spending on this. Are we ready to move on? Do people feel like we've,
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo Frank's point of seasonality makes sense. The expansions that you've listed, I think, make sense. Supply chain makes sense, and anything that falls into this process bucket that's more nuanced, come back to us, so.
Sounds good.
all right, let's move on to number 3. This is about the staff interpretation. Let me read this. Staff recommends the board confirm this interpretation of the request is correct, and if so, staff considers the board may not grant the request. If staff's interpretation is incorrect, staff recommends the board afford the applicant the opportunity to clarify. So the above number 3 is the staff interpretation. So the question to you, applicant, is that an accurate interpretation?
Yeah, I think that comment 3 and 4 go into the bucket of things we're passing on, and we're going to stick with seasonality. So I think we can just kind of skip them. I'm happy to let those requests go. I think the seasonality and supply chain items make sense. And, you know,
Is
I'm
that-
happy to come back when and if those other issues become
Okay.
more important.
Are we good with that? Yeah, okay. All right, number, that was hiding. Number 5. The applicant needs to calculate the allowable density based on buildable area as a condition of approval.
So this one's a little confusing to me. So we're you know, the heading right here says 16 homes and adding 16 homes to the approved 155. But we're not doing that. The 155 that were approved included the 14 duplexes that we're putting in now. So the 155 is still the number.
Well, that was an error then. If the number in the final decision didn't reflect the removal of the 14 homes, that was an error. I thought it did.
So like even the project description in the staff report says that the approval was for 155 lots.
Because that's
like-
what the decision said. If it didn't remove the 14 from that 155, that was an error in the final plot. I mean, it doesn't have any effect if you get approval now. And this is a record-keeping thing about,
The challenge here is that the R1 zoning district, so just backing up, there's a finding of fact in our permit that 155 homes are approved. So 155 is the number that was approved. Per the staff report, we are throwing out the cottage layout amendment, which resulted in 2 additional units. Just forget it. That phase is under construction. We're too far behind anyway. We can't redesign it, so those are gone. All I'm seeking to do is put the 14 units back in with the height waiver that we talked about at final. The permit approved 155 homes. We're still going to be at 155 homes when those go back in, and I just don't perceive that there's much to talk about here. And so I'm hoping that we can just accept that.
so
I'm missing something. When you talk about final, what final was that?
the final plat approval, SD 2210, which was approved in early '23.
And how is that different than this final plat?
So this is an amendment to that final plat.
Okay, I'm sorry, I got it. Okay.
So staff comment number 5 is just saying that density, now that you're proposing to amend your final plat, is calculated based on buildable area. And you should update your allowable density calculations to reflect buildable area because it's an amended final plat. I think there's no universe in which you're going to have a problem here.
Well, so I think that I would rather not get into the issue of what the density of the PUD is. I believe that it was approved for 155 homes. We're still proposing 155 homes. The R1 PRD zoning district density is 1 unit an acre. So I don't know how I would get anywhere near 155. And it's very unclear how the new rules and the PUD standards apply in this project. And so I think it might be a good idea to simply accept the 155 was found to be the size of the project and proceed with that.
I think the board can deliberate on it unless you have
Okay.
questions.
The board can deliberate on that, yeah. Okay,
And, yeah, and I'm happy to, I sort of would like to get some feedback on that because I think a sort of denial of the density would be challenging as a, approval. But, we can, because I also think there's like a massive exercise that would need to be undertaken to sort of understand how an amendment to an existing PUD with a vested density interacts with the new PUD standards and the minimum density that you're required to get in a PUD, I think is 4 units per acre, but
No,
like.
that doesn't apply here. So you're a general PUD because it's an amendment to a previously approved PUD. So there's no minimum density requirements. And the density, if I recall correctly, is based on the density of the entire PUD. So it's the C1 LR area, the R12 area, the IC area, all together.
There's also a challenge here in the fact that this R1 land, which is zoned as 1 unit an acre, is serviced by sewer and water, and by right has density of 5 units an acre under state law. So I just think this is a little bit of a hornet's nest. We have a finding for the 155. We're only seeking to get those added back in, and, we can provide more information on that, but it seems like a bit of a hornet's nest from here.
so are you saying you're not going to recalculate and update?
I can do it if required. I'm unclear exactly how to do it. And so I think that, I'm only seeking to get to what is previously approved. The finding of fact states, the applicant has calculated the project has an available density of 452 based on acreage of each zoning district. The applicant has proposed 155 homes. The board finds this criterion met. I'm still proposing 155 homes. And so I believe that it's still met.
So we're ready to move on then.
Perfect.
Number 6, similar, update, recalculation and update, update their building coverage chart to include the proposed homes within the C1LR and verify the accuracy of the value provided for the R1 PRD zoning district.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's just an error in that spreadsheet.
Okay.
And we did verify, Scott, you verified all the coverages, right?
Yes.
We were missing, I think, like 4,000 feet in the C1LR, and we'll add that in.
Okay. All right, number 7, this is regarding height. I'll read part of it. Staff recommends the board consider whether to require architectural elevations to evaluate whether granting the height waiver is contrary to the purpose of the height standards to create pedestrian scale cohesive neighborhoods. Staff notes elevations will be necessary to demonstrate compliance with 13.17 discussed below.
We submitted architectural elevations for those buildings yesterday, as well as a couple photos of built buildings, as they exist in Hillside currently.
Okay? Thanks.
So those are he's
Okay.
got them up on
Now
the
we're
screen.
moving.
Want to look at them?
Sure,
Would
that'd be great.
The recommended thing to do here.
You know, I would like to recommend a 2-minute break, 3-minute bio break, because this is,
It's good by me.
why don't we take 5? We'll see you all back here. 5.
Oh, Stonington? Oh, yeah. That was an O'Brien Brothers development.
I was a little green when I did that one.
Hey, we didn't build it though, okay?
You didn't what?
We just developed the land. We did not build those units. I get
There's some stories that I don't know.
I get hate mail about those units.
Really?
It was not me. It was not us.
All right, okay.
Experience has been positive.
Fantastic.
All right, so here are the elevations.
So we're ready to start back up again. Sorry, we stopped the audio for
Oh, okay.
the folks at home.
Okay, so we're ready to start again. So we're on number 7. So we have the architectural, let's see, consider whether to require architectural elevations to
Right, so the
evaluate.
gist here is that they're asking for height modification. Height is the dimensional standard, and the board has the authority, sorry, I wrote this in very verbose way. The board has the authority to grant dimensional modifications when the modification is due to physical site limitations or allows for more creative and efficient subdivision and site layout and is consistent with the intent and purpose of the regulations and comprehensive plan. So the reason we're looking at the elevations is to see if those tests are met.
Would you read the tests again? Just the,
Sure. The proposed modification is due to physical site limitations or allows more creative and efficient subdivision and site layout and is consistent with the intent and purpose of the regulations and comprehensive plan.
what does the board think?
Well, I can tell you what we said. So, we definitely, the units are, these particular homes are designed to back up and like sort of retain a grade that's behind them, right? So there are 3 stories on the front and there are 2 stories on the back. And so it's a design that's unique to situations where adjacent to a road, you have an uphill slope that's fairly significant. And so you need to do something. You can't just build a flat house. Your front porch would be open and your back door would be buried. So there's a situation there to deal with. And I think these have been really successful. People love them. They fit really well in the community. They're very similar to the adjacent road, which I think one of the tests in there somewhere in the regulations talks about sort of similarity to adjacent uses. And so, our feeling is that it's a good use. The other sort of unique site characteristic here is that you've got C1LR zoning district butting up against a residential 1 zoning district, and you've got these two sort of very different types of uses that sort of meet at this road.
Right.
And so what we didn't want to do, which is why we shifted to this product during preliminary plat originally, we had a bunch of 1-story, homes there. So they were basically like a drive-under garage with 1 story above it. And it felt like that was a little bit too insignificant of a elevation to have butting up to potentially 3 or 4-story buildings across the street. And so we moved to this, which is a little bit taller, holds the street a little better, and sort of affects that better transition. And that was the reasoning behind it.
For measuring height, is it and I think it might be relevant here, it's from the average grade, is that right? If you're going uphill, do you have an average grade?
So the
Or am I
board
right in my
granted an
assumption?
alternative way to measure grade, but I don't remember the specifics. Do you? Was it across the board for the project, or was it just in that one area?
So
So yes, generally. But for this project, the board granted something slightly different.
even accounting for, in the typical manner that you measure from average grade, they're, a foot or so too tall, a couple feet maybe. I don't remember. There's a chart.
What's the allowed height, what height do you have, according to however it is you measured?
28 feet is the allowed height, and the homes, looks like the maximum waiver is 3.6 feet. And the homes actually range from, it looks like 27.9 to 31.6, which is, again, just because the homes kind of go down a very long road. So the grade is up and down, some of them higher, some of them lower. But I think importantly, too, and I believe it's a footnote in the staff report, as complete, the waiver is only like a foot because we're changing the grading of the site to build the road. And so relative to the actual built road, we're looking at a 0.7 to 1.3 foot.
Yeah, well, except the method is the pre-development grade, right?
Unless the board grants alternative.
Okay. Okay.
But more importantly, there's 3 stories facing the street, which is not allowed in the R1 district. And so, even if we could shave 5 inches off the height of the house, we would still have that issue.
Yeah, could we go back to where it talked about the number of stories? Because either there's a typo or I read it wrong. No, to where the requirement is for the number of stories,
I'm sorry, Frank, what are you asking?
The black letter, could you roll up a little more?
Right, so it's where Marty's cursor is, the height limit in the R1 PRD is 28 feet from average pre-construction grade to the midpoint of the roof and 2 stories facing the street.
Okay. Okay,
You okay?
yeah.
All right. Do we need to discuss the height anymore?
Well, can we waive the 2 stories? Can we modify the 2 stories facing the street?
To allow 3?
Yeah,
Sure sounds like a dimension to me.
all right.
Okay.
I mean, the board has other methods. There's alternative compliance that requires demonstration of a whole bunch of different tests, which the applicant did provide. Staff thought they didn't need to go there, but they're prepared to go there if the board would like them to.
Let me ask you a question. What are the 3-story fronts looking at? What's across the street?
Currently, a commercial subdivision with no buildings in it, but I think we had in our final plat approvals, I believe, conditions that allow up to 3 stories on that side of the street. So
And there was a condition that required a minimum of 2 as well.
the intention is to have some fairly substantial structures across the street, taller than these.
Okay,
So
I'm done.
I think I'd add too that on the other side of the street, you're going to have the reverse situation. So you're going to have facing the street a certain amount of stories, and then on the other side of the building, there'll be 1 more. So it might be 3 facing the street and then maybe a 4-story building on the downhill side.
I understand.
Okay, are we ready to move on? Number 8, this is about the cottage homes not facing the street. Are you still proposing to do the cottage homes?
No, I'm going to take or revert back to the previously approved configuration of 2 larger single-family homes.
Okay,
I'm going to go that direction.
okay,
It's just, we were just trying to do something to increase, the number of lower-priced homes.
Sure.
It's honestly we're just too far along. That phase is under construction right now. I've got people trying to buy those cottages, and so we just kind of need to
okay,
move on.
okay. Speaking of moving on, so let's do a time check. It's 8:45.
They're the last ones on the agenda.
No, I know.
Okay.
I know. We go till 10, and then we adjourn for the night. Are you okay with continuing?
Sure, if need be.
Okay,
I think you'll get through it.
Got time.
Yeah.
all right.
Also, I apologize about the poor numbering that's about to.
What's up with? the
Sorry.
number? Yeah, okay. So 5, which is really 9.
Yes.
What?
Staff
They restarted the number.
recommends the board discuss whether they consider the proposed transitions acceptable, particularly on Lot 36.
So this is talking about where it's sketched, they presented the transformer.
Can we see a picture of that?
The transformer.
Well,
Maybe pull up the landscaping
area.
plan?
Yeah.
There's bookmarks. Oh, there you go. Look at you. Nope. There's a zoom in one.
That's it.
31.
It shows you there.
31, you said?
Oh, I mean, that one's a good one. Actually, that's fine. Right?
Yeah, it's off to the
Because
right,
the
but it's there.
landscaping with it, yeah.
So this is like a super confusing proposal for this battery building. And I feel like I sort of need to just kind of explain what we're going for, because it's the reason that we created this landscaping plan is to solidify landscaping that will be required if this battery building gets built by GMP with you guys. So this is me and O'Brien Brothers saying, look, we want this thing screened like crazy. We understand, though, that Green Mountain Power will get permits for that through a completely different process, through the PUC. And the city may or may not even get to weigh in on that. And so the reason that we're proposing the landscaping is to say, look, if something gets built on this lot that you subdivide, O'Brien Brothers will guarantee that this landscaping gets put in around it. And so anything, and that can be a condition of our permit, we're happy with that. But we're not proposing the building
Right.
and so, or the facility. Like, that is a separate thing. And I think the complexity behind it is that the city council has an offer of dedication for this entire lot currently. And so in order for GMP to build that, they're going to need to go to the city council and get authorization to build it. And all that we're trying to do is say, let's carve off a lot so that should the council say, hey, we would rather you have your own lot and not have an easement on our land to do this, they can give them the lot. But they may say, we'd rather you have it on our land and we give you an easement. Like, I don't actually know where that's going to go. So I think by subdividing the lot, we open the opportunity for the council to either give the lot or retain the lot and say no. And by putting the landscaping here, we're saying, even if they just give GMP the lot and then GMP goes to the PUC commission and says, we're going to put this battery in and the city zoning is overwritten by that process, we have a condition in our permit that says if something gets built on that lot, O'Brien will install this screening. And so at that point, if there's an amendment that's needed because something changed, like, we'll have to come in and get that, but you will have something to sort of enforce around that, and that's why we have all this in here, just so.
So,
I think the Public Utility Commission statute says city gets input
Okay, well, this is belt and suspenders then, I guess. We just did the design and figured I'd show it to you.
Charlie, did you start to say something?
Right, so I'm looking at another plan, right? And what you're trying to say is that lot 59 is going to go with 18 as dedication, or it's going to be carved off for GMP? Or we're
Yeah, so
leaving
this,
it open
this
as an
gets into
option?
another staff comment, which is the sort of open space calculation, which I don't think that we're actually looking to reduce the amount of civic space. The city already has this space, so I can't change it at all. I can't make it not civic space. The only person who can make this lot a GMP battery is the council.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the complexity here. All I'm trying to do is get this, because we were here already for the duplexes.
Yep.
To just get this resolved so that should the council say, we'd like you to have your own lot, that it exists already and we don't need to come to you guys and get an amendment to add a lot. I just wanted to kind of have the table set. It may always just remain in city ownership. I don't think we know the answer to that.
Okay, we ready?
Well, so is the issue, is the issue that carving off this lot potentially violates the open space requirement of the permit? Is the, I'll say it again for
No,
the.
it doesn't. I
Hang
mean,
on
we
a
looked
minute, I
at
have to.
Open space
Want to hear
calculation.
what Frank has
Just
to
a
say
second.
again for the
I didn't
record?
have the mic
Sorry,
on, I
Andrew.
got it. So is the issue that carving off the lot will compromise the open space requirement of the permit?
So there's a staff comment that's about calculating the open space areas per the new regulations because we're reducing the civic space by carving off this lot. We did look at the calculation, Scott did it. We can provide that. I think we're still in excess of the required civic space. I just think,
So that would be a limiter on our willingness to allow it, right?
That would be a what?
A limiting factor on our willingness to allow the carve-off.
we still have more civic space than
So
required.
if they provide the calculation that shows they are achieving greater than the standard,
Oh, well, if that still works, it would, that's fine, yeah, okay. But
Yeah,
it needs to work, right?
We can provide it. I just kind of thought maybe if, you accept that we're not really choosing to give the space, the city already has the space, and so we can't reduce the amount of civic space. This subdivision doesn't reduce the amount of civic space. The only thing that will reduce the amount of civic space is the city council deciding to do something else with their land that was given to them. So it's like a little bit of a nuance. I just think you could avoid talking about it altogether if you wanted to, but we can also give you the calculations. We're in excess of it, and I'm happy to do.
Yeah, I would just, oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm just saying, I think the thought there is if it does get to the point where it gets designated as not civic space, we've already covered that doesn't create an issue for this project, so understand the kind of cart before the horse there, but.
I'm not sure how this works legally. We have an irrevocable offer of dedication, but we have not yet accepted
Right.
the land.
you're sort of doing the city's work for them if they wanted to lop this off, right? They're by doing that.
Sort of, but the city doesn't own it yet. The city just has an offer for it.
The
So
offer
they're-
has conditions, though, that
Little,
basically it's theirs.
yeah.
Not
Well,
until
that's
they
what
accept it.
irrevocable offer means.
So but that offer has meets and bounds in it,
Yes.
and this would potentially modify those meets and bounds?
No, only city council, as Andrew said, can throw up a portion of the lands that they have been offered.
So this we'll have to do, if you complete this, we would do a new offer of dedication
to include
that
the meets and
included the
bounds
new
for the-
meets and bounds,
yeah.
and we would give that to the city, and if they accepted it, they would be accepting all the same land, just in a new format.
lots.
Yeah.
2 lots instead
And
of
then
one.
they can choose what direction to go with it to
Yeah.
allow the
You're being
building.
potentially helpful.
Or I imagine that what will be requested is 2 separate offers, so the city can accept just one of them.
Yeah. That all works for us.
Okay. All right, let's move on to number 6, which is really number 10. Staff recommends the board direct the applicant to revise the design of Lot 36 to meet building orientation standards or revert to the previously approved large, single-family homes.
That's the one that they're not doing.
Okay, that's the cottage.
Okay.
Just say revert.
All right. now-
Reverting.
Pardon?
We are reverting.
Yes, okay. Number 7, which is number 11, we need elevation drawings, please.
That's what they just showed.
Yes.
Okay.
So the elevation drawings are specifically, so there's a reason for elevation drawings, and that is building facades are encouraged to employ a theme variation approach. The board sort of made their findings. They're not proposing anything different on that. Placement of garages and parking. So number 2 above is a standard that existed under LDRs that existed when the original project was approved. Numbers 3 and 4 are new standards. And so, in for a penny, in for a pound, if you're modifying your approval, you need to comply with all the regulations. And the new regulations say that the garage must be set back a minimum of 8 feet, and front-facing garages that are part of the principal building shall not exceed 40% of the linear width of the building. Clearly, they don't meet that. So I'm not sure what happens now.
We did talk about this at sketch plan. My recollection of the feedback we received was, given the situation, that we should provide a justification to waive this requirement. I thought that I came up with a pretty good one, which is that section 13.17 is explicitly does not apply to buildings on lots greater than 1 acre. And these buildings are on a lot greater than 1 acre. And so, I just threw that out there because that's what it says. It's a direct, so this standard garage percentage is section 13.17. Applicability of section 13.17 says buildings on lots greater than 1 acre do not need to comply. So I threw that out there as potentially that waiver justification that we were looking for. I think that we can also use the application that was submitted to give some pretty good reasons under alternative compliance. I believe that the board could waive this under that methodology, so we're happy to do that. We can provide it in writing.
Wait a minute. If there's a section of the regulation that says it doesn't apply to your lot, then you don't need a waiver, it just
I
doesn't
had a
apply.
whole footnote about that, and that footnote seems to have disappeared. So I'm very sorry, but I can read it aloud if you give me a moment, or Marty can show you that section of the LDR. But the gist of it is that this section, just stay with the whole page actually for a second. So this section applies to all new residential or predominantly residential buildings except buildings on lots that exceed 1 acre in size. This standard, the choice to use the plural buildings is a grammatical one, not a policy decision. This standard is to exempt buildings, I can't not say buildings that are on their own lot that exceed 1 acre in size from the orientation and facade standards, because when you have a lot of 1 acre or more, you're inclined to build a long driveway and put your home way at the back and face the pond or whatever you have your 1 acre for. That it's not a intention to say multiple buildings on one lot are exempt. from this.
Oh, is that how you're interpreting it? You have no, never mind, I withdraw.
Well, we have buildings on a lot that exceeds 1 acre.
Come on, Andrew, here's my response.
It seems
right.
ambiguous to me.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
So you need to make a decision on these other standards of placement of the garage needs to be 8 feet back from the front, and the garage can make up no more than 40% of the width of the front facade. This is where staff thought that waiver requirement that's not a dimensional, but maybe a alternative compliance would apply.
Yeah, so I have some notes about alternative compliance. I can read them for you just so that we can kind of maybe throw out the sort of reasoning. So I think everybody understands the history of how these got here, why they're here, why we're here under these rules instead of being approved under the old ones. So the alternative compliance, from what I have here, says dimensional and design standards can be modified to provide flexibility necessary to address unique site conditions or constraints, enable compatibility with existing or planned development in the vicinity, or to all for exceptional and innovative design. I might have a little typo in there. So, our take on it is, we already talked about the sort of unique site characteristics. The fact that there's a huge uphill slope, I think, makes it really hard to set the garage back 8 feet. Like, you're just going back into a huge slope 8 feet, so like, that's challenging. It's challenging to sort of put the garage behind, because you'd have to sort of arc up around the house to get to your garage, which would be sort of a... So, the homes are designed to bridge the two unique zoning districts. I think the enable compatibility with existing or planned development in the vicinity. This is a picture of O'Brien Farm Road. The 14 duplexes we're talking about are literally on O'Brien Farm Road, which will be extended to this new location. So it would be an identical, it would be virtually identical to existing planned adjacent development. And so, and then the last thing that I would throw out there is that the sort of the design of the home is unique in the sense that it creates a very approachable product, and it's a very approachable price point, and it's one of the lower priced models that are planned for Hillside East. And so I think that that's a virtue of the efficiency of it. And so if you make the building wider to reduce the percentage that's taken up by the garage, you can either remove the garage, which creates marketability challenges, which may or may not be something that you would want to do, or you can make the unit wider. If you make the unit wider, you reduce the number of units on the road, which means you have a higher cost of infrastructure allocated to each unit, which just drives the price of the homes up. So I think for sort of all those reasons combined, we sort of felt like we could hit the target on the alternative compliance. I'll leave that for you.
And I buy the rationale.
You do.
I
It's
do.
kind of pick your poison, actually. It's, yeah. Okay. All right, good. Thank you for all that, Andrew.
Right.
Let's move on to number 8, which is really number 12. We need a computation, please, of both buildable area and civic space lots for record-keeping purposes.
Yep, we can do that. I'm a little bit hesitant to do it and confused by the sort of way that the PUD interacts with the past approval. Like this is an amendment to an existing PUD, and the buildable area excludes planned roadways. But the way the regulation's written, those planned roadways, like, they wouldn't have been, like, it's referencing a master plan level is where you would lock in your density. And so there's like this weird thing happening here where we're getting penalized for roads that were put into the project during the original PUD. And it's unclear to me that penalty exists for someone coming in with a new application, right? Like, if you came in with a new application with a raw piece of dirt and you were just saying, I'm here for a master plan, they'd say, are there any planned roads? You'd say, no. I'm coming in with an amendment.
No, it includes the project roads as well.
At the master plan level, it does? I mean, again, it's unclear to me how these things interact and what vested rights exist under the PUD, and I'm hesitant to like amend vested rights for the sake of something that.
So there are no vested rights. That's something that we talked about at length because the applicant chose to go this route. And actually, this is somewhat of on us as the planning department. The applicant submitted their application slightly before vesting was in the rules. And so they said, we can't wait any longer. We need to get going. Mm-hmm. And so they submitted this application, and now they have a PUD that has no vesting. And so everything that they touch that is different under the new rules, they have to show compliance with the new rules. If they weren't touching their open spaces, there wouldn't be any requirement to calculate their open spaces. If they weren't touching their density, which, talking about it tonight, you may not be, then they wouldn't have to do a calculation of buildable area. lots of other things that they're not touching. Does that make a little more sense? No.
I think that, the plat permit issued vests rights. So again, I don't necessarily understand how all those different pieces interact. I think for the purpose of the open space reduction, it would seem like the argument that I made that said we're not really reducing it could hold. I'd sort of like to avoid findings related to this because I sort of feel like it has negative implications for the vested rights of the PUD as a whole, which includes much more than just what we're talking about. But I can certainly provide the calculation. We're exceeding it. So.
Okay, questions?
I'll go ahead and provide it.
Okay.
I think it's fine.
Thanks, Andrew. Number 9, which is number 13, will the HOA or O'Brien Brothers retain ownership of the portion of Lot 18 to be subdivided and developed with battery storage, future Lot 59? We kind of touched on this earlier, but
Yeah, sorry this is phrased so awkwardly in context of the conversation we just had. I would like to rephrase it.
sure.
Is O'Brien Brothers or the HOA willing to retain ownership? Is that what you expect the city council to want to do?
I think we'd certainly entertain it. Ideally, I think Green Mountain Power would own it.
Okay.
But that would be, we're not unwilling to if it's a requirement.
So if you dedicate each lot separately, and the city only accepts one, and then Green Mountain Power decides not to put the battery there, you retain ownership.
The city will hold both offers, so I would think that they would, I wouldn't think that they would, I would think that they would decline to accept in the context of an agreement with GMP to do the thing. I don't think that the city's gonna just, lose their chance, but
Right,
that would be for them to sort out, but I would think there would be some sort of, you could put in here a condition that if Green Mountain Power doesn't build the thing, that will,
And the city somehow rejects the offer, right?
that we
That
would
the-
rededicate it to the city, or that the HOA would retain it as open space or
I
something
think
like that.
it's just to
That's all.
define worst-case scenario. If all these different
Yeah.
things happen, it goes to the HOA, right?
Yeah, that's fine. And you could say that it would stay as open space in that event, something like that, if you wanted to.
Okay, moving on to number 10, which is
We're not looking to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, throw a house on this lot, I swear.
number 14. We need you to address the comments of the Department of DPW, Public Works, before we close the hearing. Provide a detail for the circuit training path and any other paths that are proposed to be located on property or in easements that may be transferred to the city.
We can do that.
Okay.
It's no problem.
Thank you. Next, 11, which is 15. This is about the noise level of the battery. I'm going to read it. Staff recommends the board discuss whether they are satisfied with the informal testimony provided at sketch that the noise level of 60 to 65 decibels at the battery decreases to ambient at the property line, pardon me, which is located between 4 and 68 feet away, or whether they will require a more formal demonstration that the sound level is reduced to ambient at 50 feet away and does not exceed 45 decibels at the property line.
I guess, so for this, you're suggesting that we would need, documentation.
It's up to you. If you want to request a formal letter or, a sound study, or if the testimony was adequate.
What is the proximity to where people are actually living?
The one, sorry.
Go ahead.
You testify.
I'm sorry.
So we went through this at sketch plan, right? The one issue was the house to south.
South.
And left, right?
Yeah, it's coming back to me now, right?
Formal, which was unfortunate.
How can testimony be informal?
At sketch.
Oh, sketch, okay, right, okay.
So the home is somewhere where there's, where the tree, where there's a cutout from the trees, yeah, in there.
It's decently far and very well wooded. Also, again, like, we're not proposing this battery building, so I think it would be a little bit premature to sort of give testimony as to the impacts of it, because it's not, like, we're proposing a subdivision.
Something we can return to at a different time.
Yeah, I would think so.
All we
So
sort
the
of did
board
was tell
doesn't
you
get another
why.
whack at
We-
it, right?
Because
It goes to the PUC.
PUC. Which I think we discussed, I mean, my recollection of my thoughts after sketch was the testimony that GMP provided was sufficient, and that there was, some, the PUC looks at that as well as far as noise impacts, but also what they provided didn't raise any red flags for us to try to put something in place on our end and just defer to the PUC on it. That's my position, thoughts on it.
Yeah, it was my impression from the testimony that they were going to meet the standard and
Yep.
that they were doing that without landscaping, right? And that they expected the additional landscaping and the trees to help buffer that
Right.
sound, but I guess it's informal.
It makes
but,
sense.
I mean, it seemed like they'd been, I don't know,
Yeah.
putting these up, and it seemed like that was, yeah, I didn't have any concerns. But.
Okay. All right, number 12, which is 16. We need stormwater. We need to understand the stormwater management system computations.
Yeah, I've done those. We just didn't include them in
Okay.
the application. I can send them to Marissa and Dave.
Perfect, thanks, Scott. Okay, the last comment, 13, actually 17. This is about relocating the battery storage to 5 feet from the property line instead of 4 feet.
Yeah, I mean, we can, again, I think that's fine. You could also just, yeah. Again, it's conceptual on the plan, and I think their final plan will be different.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
But,
the
yeah,
key for
so-
you, though, is, I guess they would have to do grading, right? If they need additional grading, because they have to push it back a foot from the road, right? Or you,
The sketches we've seen could accommodate a foot very easily.
Yeah, I'm not sure the right way to sort of do it, because of what we've submitted is, we're not really proposing
you're not proposing to do the work.
building.
I think the
but-
board can include a condition that says, the board recognizes that it's conceptual and any final design must meet the setback requirement of 5 feet from the right-of-way.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Okay, good.
So there's a couple things that need to be addressed before they can close.
We need public comment.
And, public comment. Good work, Don.
So what are the items that need to be addressed, Marla?
A couple of things that they were going to submit. The details of the rec path, the stormwater,
Open space.
open space, but again, I'm very confident that they meet it. I think I'm comfortable with that being a condition of approval.
So does it make sense to continue the hearing, schedule it, knowing that it'll be a very brief, just touch-in?
Yeah.
And, okay.
Wait, so why couldn't the other two be conditional approval?
Because other departments have to review them.
What are the other two?
It was the DPW comments.
DVW and storm comments. I would like to proceed to a draft decision at the continued hearing,
Okay. And when would you propose that is?
August 6th.
Oh, okay.
So that's 2 meetings out. We need your stuff in 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yep.
Is that doable?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Do it in a day.
So let's pause and ask for any public comment. Is there any online, Marty?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. So I would entertain a motion to continue site preliminary and final plat application SD 2412 to August 6th.
So moved.
Thank you, Frank.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? It's a deal.
All right.
I'm already on that August 6th meeting, so.
Perfect.
What was the date? The 2nd?
August
6th.
Well, let's hope it's not as nice of a night, huh? Man. You guys are doing God's work in here on these nights.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful day. Thank you for your patience and hanging in there with us.
You guys.
Happy 4th of July.
Yeah, use one.
Okay, there were no minutes,
No minutes.
Just all my papers
so I think,
up here.
is there any other business?
I think we're okay. I think there's no other business.
Okay, then I think the meeting is adjourned. Happy 4th of July, everyone.
Thank you.
You guys,
Take care, Andrew.
have a good month. Hopefully long weekend. You guys taking some time off?
Hopefully what?
Hopefully a long weekend, right? You gotta take that Friday off.
You working Friday?
I'm working all week. Even the 4th?